Well, DFID's core objective, and our raison d'etre, if you like, is around poverty reduction. And we see an essential component of delivering on that agenda as being about the development of capable, accountable and responsive states. In the absence of states which have those features, long-term development, sustainable development will be incredibly difficult to achieve. And in terms of building effective systems of accountability, parliaments clearly play a fundamental role in mediating the relationship between citizens and the state and ensuring that those views are effectively represented in terms of dialogue with the executive. And therefore, so far as DFID is concerned, while we see that Parliament has an intrinsic role to play in the governance of a country, it also has a really important instrumental function in underpinning the sustainability of development. And essentially in terms of guaranteeing that the investments we make in areas like health, like education, like water, are protected for the long term. Essentially, we fundamentally believe that effective parliaments are at the heart of effective development and all the positive outcomes that we associate with development. Better schools, better health centres, improved infrastructure, etc., etc. So that's why we work on this agenda, and DFID's agenda around parliamentary strengthening has expanded a lot in recent years. We're now working in over 20 countries around the world, and increasingly the way we work is informed by an approach to strengthening systems of accountability across the board. So as well as supporting parliaments, we're also working to strengthen election processes, to reinforce the role of political parties, support independent media. And all these activities are clearly connected. So in terms of the way we do programming, we're trying to take a much more integrated approach than was perhaps the case in the past. But in terms of Parliament specifically, I would say there would be three key principles that inform our approach to parliaments, but are also at the heart of good development practice. The first, and I guess most important principle, is that a parliamentary strengthening agenda needs to be owned and led by the parliaments concerned, if it's to deliver the outcomes we hope. I hope that gone are the days when donors, certainly DFID, would come in and prescribe a particular model, for example the Westminster model, and push that particular agenda in its parliamentary strengthening approach in other countries. Increasingly what we see is, in fact, parliaments developing their own strategic plans, their own agenda for reform, and DFID programmes coming in to support that. The second key principle is very much related to the Paris Declaration around harmonising our support better. So harmonising our support with other providers of assistance, other donors. And again, whereas we might have in the past had our own DFID projects with DFID labels attached to it, much more these days we're doing this alongside other colleagues as part of basket fund type arrangements. And in terms of ensuring the effectiveness of our aid, reducing duplication, reducing fragmentation, that is really critical. And last but not least, our approach is very much informed by the recognition that parliamentary reform is not just a technical process. It's fundamentally at its very core a political process. So what that means in practice is one needs to go beyond prescribing technical solutions in response to gaps that you might identify, and you need to drill deeper in terms of understanding the causes of some of these gaps, some of these weaknesses, and you need to understand What's the underlying politics? What's the nature of the relationship between Parliament and the executive? What's the nature of the relationship between political parties? How do they help parliamentarians to deliver on their goals, or in some cases undermine what parliamentarians are trying to do? What's the nature of the relationship between parliamentarians and their constituents? And what does that mean for the type of incentives that parliamentarians have to do their formal roles in the areas of lawmaking, oversight and representation? And unless you understand the underlying politics and the interests and the incentives that that creates, it's very difficult to be able to prescribe particular technical solutions. So much more these days, DFID programs in support of parliamentary strengthening are informed by an explicitly political understanding of the context to help, once again, ultimately for us to deliver better and more effective aid.